Hello, Dog Nation, and welcome back in. It is day 3 of the NFL Scouting Combine. I'm Kaylee Mansell with Mike Griffith. I don't know if it's just because we manifested it or put that energy into the air, but we finally got somebody who would talk about the Kirby hot mic moment, and it was none other than Lovett. Here's what he had to say.
Probably my favorite one is when probably like the day after I had got drafted, not drafted, the day after I had committed, he was like, yeah, you're gonna come here, we're gonna love you, and we're gonna, bring you in. And the next day we had conditioning, and like for y'all that don't know, like Georgia conditioning is like different than everybody else, so like I had to get in like shape. And can we curse or no? He was dog. He was like, Dom, get your ass in shape. I was like, I am. I'm just not in Georgia shape. He's like, I don't give a damn about none of that. And that's really like, I just got mother F like my whole first week.
Mike, I think it sums it up right there. Hey, I was in shape. I just wasn't in Georgia shape.
Yeah, I like that. And there is Georgia shape. And everybody that comes into Georgia, whether it's a freshman or whether it's a transfer, Kirby Smart's going to make it a point to say, whatever shape you're in, it's not going to be good enough. And the guys that have been there already know that. Here's the secret, Dom. You can be in Georgia shape, and it's still not going to be good enough. It's never good enough with Kirby Smart, and that's why everybody loves playing for this guy, because he continues to raise the bar and get the most out of you.
And it's, of course, no surprise that Brock Bowers was the only one that made it look easy, running while he's puking at the same time.
A little graphic there, but I kind of tried to imagine it, and it's like it doesn't matter if he's on fire, apparently. But that's Brock Bowers. I mean, the guy's like a robot or something. You just wonder. I mean, he just seems to defy, human law. You think about the Matrix play against Ohio State. You hear the stories about him running sprints and, freshmen trying. One slows down, one speeds up, the other one speeds up, the other one slows down. It's like Brock Bowers has become like the eighth wonder of Georgia football now. You saw what he did in the NFL, and just a guy that's too good to be true. But when you have guys like that around you, what that does is it challenges you. And once again, when you hear the Georgia players here talking about the guys that preceded them, the guys that showed them the way, the guys that set the standard, it's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy as Georgia football is good, and it stays good because one good guy follows another good guy follows another good guy. And as long as you've got that momentum, you've got something special. So, and obviously 14 guys here this year, Kaylee. It's as many as any other SEC team. I think only Ohio State has more. And I think you're going to see at least 10 guys drafted.
Well, so practice is a common topic that's come up when they talk about the development, what prepares them. It always goes back to practice. But I thought we got a unique perspective from Trevor Etienne today, who spent time at both Florida and Georgia. And he mentioned there weren't too many things that were different because Napier also came from the Nick Saban tree, and so their practices were similar. And I think that just goes back to the SEC. I mean, it really is the premier conference if you want to play in the NFL.
Yeah, but then when I asked Trevor why Georgia, he said because the standard's the standard, and he knew what he was going to get. And that still, I think, translates on the recruiting trail. When, you're sitting with Kirby Smart in front of you, you know what you're signing up for. What did Daniel Jeremiah said? The day after you commit,
you get your invite to the combine?
Yeah, unless you're Dan Jackson. But more on that later. But for the most part, that's true.
He didn't commit, though. He walked on.
Oh, no, that's a great point. Now, there is a loophole there, right? I guess if you're a walk-on, that doesn't apply. But, Dirty Dan, I still think should
still deserve to be here.
Still deserve to be here. No, and throw Chaz Chambliss in there. I asked Arion Smith that question. I said, who's the toughest Georgia player you were ever around? Fully expecting to hear Jalen Carter's name. And I got Chaz Chambliss. And all I could think about was the scene of Chaz Chambliss walking off the field. Remember that? Again, was it against Alabama when the fans were going crazy and they run on the field? And there's a fan who is walking very close to Chaz, and Chaz is looking straight ahead, and I'm thinking, that guy doesn't know just how close to trouble he got into if he would have put one finger on MMA fighter Chaz, because that's what Chaz does for fun, is MMA, by the way, when he's not destroying people on a football field. So I thought that was a pretty interesting and insightful response from Arion Smith.
So for the guys that we got to hear from today, they'll work out tomorrow. Want to stay on the topic of Trevor Etienne because I think this is a way deeper running back class than we could have possibly imagined. I mean, even just right next to him, you had Phil Maffa, who absolutely dominated for Clemson, and we asked Trevor, how hard was it to make that decision to stay or to come back? And he said, well, I felt like I showed all that I had. Did you agree with that statement, or do you still stand by the fact that he should have come back?
Well, it depends on what his motivation was. I mean, one more year in college, yes, he probably could have made about the same in NIL as he's going to make in the NFL, and he probably could have improved his draft stock. But who are we to say that this is the lifestyle that he wants right now? And a lot of times with the NFL, they do hold the age of these players against them. The younger you are, the more mileage they see you as having on your tread.
Especially for a running back.
Yeah, no, I would agree that this is a deeper class. And who's to say now? And I asked Trevor that question. I mean, as good as he is, and I think he's fantastic, dominant at times, he's still not listed in the top 10 running backs. And at the end of the day, do we think Etienne's going to jump in the top 10? Well, could be determined by what he does tomorrow over there at Lucas Oil Field.
Yeah, I can't help but wonder if what we saw from him in the Senior Bowl that really separated him was those pass-catching abilities. I don't think I saw him drop a pass the entire time that we're at Senior Bowl. I'm hoping that that's something that GMs will see and be like, you know what, let's go ahead and take a chance on him because we know that he can do both.
Well, and I like the accountability. You know, Trevor was asked about Georgia's slow starts and some of the lack of execution, and someone pressed and said, well, can you give us an example? And there was a lot of things Trevor could have said, but he said, I'm going to point to myself. He said, my eye discipline, my ability to read the holes, I didn't do a good enough job. I like that answer. That tells you about Trevor Etienne. He's one of the last guys, by the way, that I would have faulted for offensive execution. And yet what he did was look internally and control the controllables, which is what he has control over. So I thought that level of accountability and responsibility, if I'm an NFL or an NFL GM, I'm thinking, you know what, I like that answer.
And I'm also probably going back to watch the fact that he beat Texas not once, but twice.
And he scored 5 touchdowns in 2 games. I mean, and I asked him, I said, what was it about Texas? He said, man, I wish I knew I was so good against them. I think Georgia in general was so good against Texas because they were the underdog. I think it got their attention like, oh, we're not good enough, huh? Well, we don't often hear that around here. We're supposed to beat everybody, but we're not supposed to beat these guys? All right, sit back and watch.
You mentioned underdogs. When I think of all the Georgia guys that are here, the underdog for me is probably a guy like Arion Smith, where tomorrow that's where he has a chance to let the entire world know his name. There's a really good shot that he could break the 40 time, which right now it stands at 4.21, I believe. Yeah, John Ross ran the 4.22. Xavier Worthy broke it last year. And lots of track questions for Arion today. And he said, I don't want to tell you guys what I'm going to do because I don't want to set that expectation of myself. But I'm reading his body language. Like, I know I got this.
Yeah, and I told him, I said, well, and just so you know, we do expect you to break the record, Arion. Just so I said, and then I said, what do you think about that pressure? He said, well, that's a good thing. I like to rise to it. I'm excited for Arion. The more I get to know him, the more lovable this guy is. I mean, he is accountable. He is motivated. He is driven. I know he had some tough drops. I know Georgia fans got on him, but I'm just telling you, if you knew this guy, you would know it's like it hurt him more than anybody else. But he's determined, and I really want to see Arion Smith make it. He's come a long way.
Yeah.
He's really grown up a lot.
Well, the thing is if he were to break that time or say tie or even do that 4.22, in my mind, there's no way that a team's not going to take a chance on him just based off the speed that they see. You see that, and you're like, you know what? I can find a way to work with this guy.
Right, and he's made some plays too. I mean, I just tell you, you know, did McCole Hardman? No, McCole had a lot of return yardage, but when we're looking at prospects, Arion Smith versus McCole Hardman, you know, at the end of the day, I'm not sure there's too much difference. And McCole was right place, right time. Of course, Tyreek Hill had just left the Kansas City Chiefs, and he kind of filled that role. And I think he was a 3rd rounder. So if Arion were to run a 4.1 something, I think you could shoot him. I think you could see him shooting into the 2nd day of the draft as a late 3rd round pick.
All right, so we did have some guys that participated yesterday. I got the chance to watch some of it last night, mostly Smile, who did better on his second 40 time than the first time, which wasn't the case for many linebackers, clocked in at 4.58, but led all of the linebackers in the broad jump.
Explosion, right? Athleticism. I mean, Smile Munnan was a freak athlete in high school, and you watch him run now, and you say, yeah, football player, but athlete. So that's good for Smile. I think it also, you know, the medical, we don't know about that yet, but I think he is healthy. I think he's been healthy since the Tennessee game. I think he's a pretty solid 3rd round pick. He's very good in coverage. He's obviously a good open field tackler. He's a warhorse. He's played in some big games. He's been a leader. I think he's grown a lot as a person. I thought that was big. And another guy that I thought did a great job and kind of explained why the Senior Bowl invited him ahead of Nazir Stackhouse and Warren Brinson, that was Tyron Dawkins, Kaylee.
Yeah, 4.86 in the 40, and then also led the broad jump for defensive linemen. A little bit on the smaller side when you compare him to guys like Nazir Stackhouse and Warren Brinson, but with that agility and his ability to move even as a big guy, that's going to help him down the road.
Yeah, that's a guy that's going to be a better pro than college player. I mean, he's still in development. He's still young. I think his stock is still somewhat raw, but if you're an NFL team and you see a guy with that kind of size and speed and athleticism, you say, you know what? This is a guy we bring in that can develop under us. We put another 15 pounds on this guy, make him a tackle. Maybe he's light enough where he plays a little bit on the edge. But I think his star is on the rise. Not a guy that's recognized as a superstar or anything, but I think the NFL types look at him and go, yeah, he's an NFL player.
I want to go back to Smile for 1 second because I was listening to the broadcast last night, and they had mentioned how Smile led the team in tackles in 2022.
Yeah.
And when you think about all the people that were on the defense on that 2022 team, that right there, you need to put a star by it, because even though maybe he didn't have that same type of season because of injuries the last 2 years, when you look at all the pieces that he was playing with, for him to lead the team in tackles, and at that point, I mean, that's when they were bringing in the younger guys because they were up by so much. So for him to still be able to do that, even with a limited amount of playing time, a team's going to recognize that.
Yeah, and maybe put 2 stars, because I'm not mistaken, but I think he might have missed a game that year too.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, Smile Munnan was a very productive guy in the Georgia defense, a guy that grew a lot, a guy that I think is going to be a starter in the NFL, and I think he had a very good combine.
Mm-hmm. All right, so let's go ahead and do a preview of tomorrow. Offensive lineman, Georgia has 4 here: Tate Ratledge, Jared Wilson, Xavier Truss, Dylan Fairchild. And between Wilson, Fairchild, Ratledge, they're all kind of right there together in the rankings, all in the top 10. Who's going to have the best combine?
That's a tough one. Jared Wilson's known to be a pretty good athlete. Now, I don't know what he's going to do here and what he's not. I still think there's Georgia guys that want to wait until pro day, and I'm not sure about that. I'm not sure I think that's a good idea. I've been told by Jim Nagy that Georgia's indoor has one of the slower turfs. They would run a better time here. And I think I would rather, if I was an NFL scout or GM, I'd rather see what they did on the same turf on the same day than try to guess what the Georgia facility was like, because I think some of those pro day times have hurt Georgia in the past. I do recognize they get a little bit more preparation time and maybe a little bit more individual attention.
Yeah.
But my attitude would be, if you're healthy enough to do it here. If you don't like it, do it again. I mean, that seems like the Georgia way for these guys to want to compete and perform. Just seemed a little odd watching Jalen Walker skip the drills.
Yeah, especially for Jalen Walker. I'm glad that Malachi participated. He's going to go later today. And, I mean, he just, after hearing him yesterday, he's definitely the kind of guy that's such a competitor that this is something that he would genuinely want to do. Would have liked to see Jalen do it. But, of course, we'll be there at Pro Day on March 12th.
That's
We'll
right.
have all the coverage of that. But going back to those 40 times, and you touched on it a little bit, but if it is slower at Georgia, is it just a matter of a health thing here? And that's why you don't do it? Or is it maybe you just want more time to practice on how to get the best out of your 40 time?
Or maybe you want the NFL team to come and see you in Athens, individually. I don't know. I'm not really sure what the poker game is. I'm sure all these guys have their agents and their reasons and their professional advisors that are hired to get them the most money and keep them as high as they can in the stock. Maybe you don't want to risk a bad day, right? If you're Jalen Walker, you're like, wow, I'm being projected anywhere from 5 to 10. You don't want to go out there and have a bad run, 4-6, and all of a sudden you're off the map and you're dropped out of the conversation. This is another 2 weeks now where we're going to be talking about Jalen Walker's top 10 pick, and he's got 2 more weeks to prepare.
All right, so last thing, we get to talk to the Georgia guys, but also there's so much going on and guys that either played against Georgia or kind of in that realm from the state of Georgia. Anything that you heard today from a non-Georgia guy that made the light bulb come on?
Yeah, I mean, talking to the Notre Dame safety, Xavier Watts, I said, what did you think about the Georgia offense, right? I guess it was yesterday afternoon, and he was like, they thought Gunnar Stockton was pretty good. And they talked about his running ability and his size, and yeah, Gunnar didn't really get off in that game, but a lot of that had to do with the way Notre Dame played him. So I thought it was interesting to hear another player talk about Georgia's offense with Gunnar Stockton at quarterback. I mean, we really haven't done a whole lot of breakdown on the Sugar Bowl. I also thought it was interesting Xavier Watts thought that the game turned on the kick return. Because I think for a lot of Georgia fans,
It's a strip sack.
they talk about the strip sack, but not to Notre Dame.
Well,
It was the kickoff return that made it 20-3 that changed the dynamic of the game. And maybe we gravitate towards that because we have a tendency to second-guess play calling. I know that's a shocker. And we have a tendency to pay attention to quarterbacks, another shocker. But in reality, in the flow of the game, if Notre Dame doesn't get that kick return and Georgia gets a 3-and-out and scores, it's 13-10. So I think Xavier Watts might be right. I think maybe we've been putting a little too much on that strip sack. So you know what? Georgia could have survived that. Georgia could have overcame that.
well, they're a second-half team.
But that kick return for a touchdown changed how Georgia called plays offensively, and enabled Notre Dame to stay in their comfort zone running the ball, because we did know that Notre Dame really is not a team that can throw the ball effectively.
Well, if you're a Georgia fan and you're hearing about this quarterback battle that's going on between Gunnar Stockton and Ryan Puglisi, and you've heard all the stuff about Mike Bobo, hearing somebody that ended their season ultimately say that about your quarterback, you got to feel good about what you've got going into the next season. So that'll be it for us today. Make sure you tune into the NFL Network. That way you can see the guys work out. We know Malachi's going to be working out. We know that Trevor Etienne, Arion Smith, Lovett will be working out tomorrow. So make sure to check out the NFL Network for all things on that. From Indianapolis, I'm Kaylee Mansell with Mike Griffith, and we'll see you on the pages of DawgNation.com.